Welcome to Break Through Burnout, the bilingual podcast that helps you understand burnout better and gives you solutions to heal and live again. I'm your host, Florence Parot, and I'm a sophrology practitioner, coach, author, and burnout expert. In this podcast, on my own or in conversation with other specialists, in French or in English, I help you understand the full picture of burnout to better avoid it or recover from it. Break Through Burnout, the podcast that helps you understand and heal. Welcome to this first episode. If you're here, you're probably more than aware that numbers in burnout have significantly grown over the past few years. So one would think that this means burnout is very well known and better treated these days, but that is sadly not the case. It's still difficult for most people to really understand, find out what burnout is about. Difficult to see whether they are at risk. And very lost when they are in burnout as to how to recover. So this podcast is here to help you understand, to help you know how to avoid burnout and how to recover from it. In the podcast, we'll cover all aspects of burnout, of what it is, how to go out about treating it. And I will be interviewing several guests on the subject, as well as preparing solo episodes like this one. Some of my episodes will be in French, others in English. The solo episodes will be recorded in both languages, and the guest episodes will be in the language of the expert of the day. So first, I wanted to give you a little bit of my story, just so that you understand why. Why are we here? Why are we talking about burnout? Why is this so important for me? I went into burnout when I was 23. So at the moment where I'm recording this, that's about 30 years ago. And at that time, burnout was not something that was talked about. So I was never properly diagnosed. And having said that, I was very lucky to have a doctor who suggested that I try something called sophrology to recover better from it. What happened? Well, one day I got up and suddenly found myself collapsing on the floor with intense pain and in my stomach and completely unable to get back up, completely exhausted all of a sudden. I had been working at that time as a student in conference interpreting, so working in several languages, translating orally different types of speeches and conferences. And I had worked too hard for too many years and my brain was fried, basically. It took me a long time to recover, many years, but thanks to my doctor and my sophrologists, I was able to gently feel better and fully recover. I also was lucky enough to meet other amazing practitioners and therapists, such as a fantastic naturopath. And I was able to go back to working and having a very full life. Then years later, as I was working in an international business management environment, I realized I didn't want to stay in the corporate world all my life, and sophrology came back as a natural answer to what I was seeking. I needed purpose in my life, and that seemed to fit the bill. I really wanted to give back what I had been given when I was in burnout. Now, for those of you who don't know what sophrology is, it is fairly similar to mindfulness. Let's say there are elements that are similar to mindfulness. It is a mind-body technique. It's a mixture of gentle movements, breathing techniques, mindful exercises. It is a method that is both super simple and amazingly efficient. And I often say that it allows us to have a clear mind in a relaxed body. And that's what I ended up retraining in. And I've been helping people with burnout, anxiety, insomnia, depression, and many other subjects for nearly 20 years now. I ended up specializing in burnout quite naturally because people who were coming to me for help were either already in burnout or not very far from it. And that's how I looked more into that subject and became the expert I am today. And I'm very happy to be able to share some of that knowledge with you with this podcast. So today what I wanted to talk to you about in this first episode was, so what is burnout? Because so the good thing is nowadays a lot of people talk about it. You will find many articles, many books on the subject. But many contradict each other, and it's not always entirely clear for someone who's not really familiar with the subject what that is about. So burnout is a long-term, extreme physical, mental, and emotional fatigue. And it's caused by excessive and prolonged overload. Too much of everything has been happening for such a long time that you collapse. And it's not just in the mind, as many people would think or have us think it is. It's the whole person, and the physical aspect of it is essential, as we will see in a minute. It is usually a mixture of professional and personal life. And the system hits the emergency off button suddenly. Literally, when you enter burnout, you collapse on the floor and cannot get up, which is what happened to me and has happened to a lot of people. Most people who are in burnout can actually give the date and time of their entering burnout. If you haven't collapsed in any way, then you're probably still before actual burnout, in that hyper-stress type of phase. Now, you either collapse on the floor or you cannot get up in the morning, but it's not just, oh, I don't feel like getting up. It's really, some people have described it to me as, I thought I was paralyzed. It's that bad. And for other people, it's more of a sort of freeze situation where they are, for instance, working on their computer and suddenly everything freezes. They can't do anything anymore and they don't remember what actually happened. So whatever the situation, usually there is some form of collapse. So what happens to get you there? Well, there is this whole phase of hyper-stress that you go through for a long time. Because too much is happening in your life. Too much work, of course, but too much of everything. It can be emotional overload. It can be that you have many, many different problems piling up. It can be that on top of a lot of work, you have also a lot of responsibility at home. Plus, maybe something else happens to make it even worse. Maybe a death in the family, or a sudden event at work that changes everything. I don't know, change in management, or someone going through a very bad situation at work. Something happens and it's piling up. And how do you notice that you are in that phase of sort of losing it? You are nearly into the burnout phase itself. What are the signs that can be there when you are near burnout? Well, one of the easiest ones to find is that you're having trouble focusing, concentrating. So basically your brain is not doing its work as well as it used to. And a lot of people notice that. And it's not just once in a while, it's sort of becoming more common, and you notice it very regularly. A client of mine described it as not even remembering the names of his colleagues that he had, new colleagues that he had met the day before, and a day later, he couldn't even remember either their faces or their names or anything, which for him was very unusual. Also, there will be fatigue, feeling drained, also feeling overwhelmed with everything. But you might not truly be aware of that or want, in a way, to notice that. It may also be something about the emotions. Maybe you find yourself suddenly crying for no reason, or snapping at people, being on edge all the time, and things that usually you would not manage that way. You would not react that way usually. So you notice the difference, and it's happening too often. A client of mine said that he realized something was going wrong when he understood that every evening when he was coming back home after work, he would suddenly start shouting at his girls, which had never happened before. And that's when it clicked, there's something wrong there. I am not myself again, in a way. I'm not myself anymore. So you could also be feeling anxious, have possible aches and pains, but they may not feel big to you, but they are there. Maybe some stomach aches, maybe some back pain, maybe just catching any cold that comes your way. Also, if you are still exercising, because by that time, a lot of people are not exercising anymore, they don't have the time. But if you are still doing some form of physical activity, you may suddenly decide to do a lot more. It's, for instance, someone who has been running once in a while, maybe every Saturday or something, and suddenly they decide to get up earlier in the morning, to run every morning and prepare for a marathon. That's what I'm talking about. There's suddenly a big step up in sport. That is usually a sign that something is not quite right. And the last sign that should really get you worried is if, on top of a lot of all that I've described, you suddenly find yourself not sleeping well, and particularly waking up much earlier than before, with your to-do list unrolling in your head, like, oh, I have to do this and I have to do that. And the only thing you want to do is get up and get started, whereas it's only 5 o'clock and usually you would get up around 7, for instance. All those signs need to get you worried about what's happening there. If you have been, working a lot and finding you have a lot of those symptoms, then there is something wrong there. And what is happening inside? Well, actually, it's because your adrenal glands, which are producing adrenaline and cortisol to help manage your stress, are producing too much and have been producing too much for too long, because you have been asking that of them in a way to keep you going, to help you manage that amount of work and responsibility and activities. So it may not feel like stress to you, but your body is treating it as stress. And you are producing a lot of cortisol all the time. And you're not meant to function that way. The nervous system is meant to have ups and downs, to regulate itself, to find its balance regularly. And in this case, it has not happened for a long time. So if that goes on for too long, then suddenly the adrenals stop producing cortisol or are not producing enough, but suddenly. And that's why suddenly you crash and burn, you collapse, and you enter burnout. And once you are in burnout, you're completely unable to function for months. You cannot work, and for the first few weeks, you cannot even, do your shopping or prepare meals or go and get the children from school. You are feeling absolutely exhausted in a way that you could not even imagine, but resting or sleeping doesn't make a difference. Now, you might be sleeping better than before in terms of the number of hours, but it's not restful. You may be having nightmares, for instance, and it's definitely not doing its job. You may start having panic attacks, whereas you didn't have any before. Your brain functions even worse than before. So in terms of memory and focus, you can't even read. Pain is suddenly there, very present everywhere in the body or in very specific places. Because actually before, the cortisol was masking that pain. That's why you were thinking, oh, I'm fine, I can do this. But suddenly it's not there anymore. So you feel the true amount of pain in your body. And believe me, the whole thing is very overwhelming. It's more than frustrating, it's scary. So understanding it can help you prevent it, but it can also help you feel less anxious about it, as in, this is extremely uncomfortable, this is extremely painful, but it is a normal consequence of the way your body has functioned before that. And remember, it's a whole body thing, but actually it starts in the body. So for your adrenals to recover, to start working again normally, you need at least 6 to 12 months. So rest, of course, is essential. Well, there's not much else you can do. But it's not enough. You need also to get help from many different quarters. And actually, that is one of the things we will see in this podcast. We will discuss with the experts who will come as guests, so that you understand better and you're able to do the right thing for yourself or for those people around you who may be in that case. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed this first episode. We'll stop here for today. I could go on for hours, but we have to stop at some point. If you want to know more about burnout, solutions to recover, and my work on the subject as a sophrology practitioner and a coach, you will find all the details in the show notes. And of course, keep touch with this podcast. I will see you soon for a new episode of Break Through Burnout, the podcast that helps you understand and heal.